One of the most common expenses that landlords unnecessarily incur are tenant-caused damage. So today's video is going to talk about the types of damage that tenants cause that tenants are responsible for paying, and the ways in which landlords can try to enforce their rights better to collect damage, monies out of the tenant who caused the damage, and how to enforce leases going forward. So to begin, this is usually governed by the applicable laws, but for the most part, globally, if a tenant causes damage to a unit, a tenant's guests, their invitees, any occupants, if they cause damage to the unit or to the property at large, even common areas, it is the tenant's responsibility to pay the landlord to repair said damage. And this is often something I see with landlords. They have a million other things going on that they just end up repairing things and not passing on the cost. Or if they get to the point that they pass on the cost, they don't enforce it. And so one of the ways that you can do this is having a very strong lease. So the steps that you take to better protect yourself as a landlord and to recoup the monies is as follows. Look at your lease. The lease should specify, and I think almost all of them now do, but if it doesn't, going forward, you should incorporate this into new leases. Make it very clear that if tenants are their guests, invitees, whoever lives in the unit, whoever's in the unit, if they cause damage to the unit or the property, they're going to be responsible for paying for it. And then outline the procedure that the landlord has the right to choose the vendor to make the repairs. Tenants are required to report the repair, but are not allowed to make the repair. Reason being, obviously, because tenants are not going to spend money on having professionals fix things. They're going to be very cheap about it, and they're going to be cheap with your property. So that you have the right to know about the damage, you have the right to send your own vendor, and that you have the right to bill the tenant for the cost of the repair. And then you should put in the lease, the repair is going to be added to the tenant's rent statement, ledger, whatever you call it, but the running list of, rents and expenses and payments issued, whatever document they're using to track this, and that the repair will be added to that. Tenants should have, you can give them 30 days to pay for the repair. If they don't pay for the repair, then it's deemed to be a material breach of their lease, and then you can evict on it. Now, and part of backing yourself up and trying to pass on this expense is, and I will do probably a lot of videos on this, have a very good move-in report with photos and videos, signed by the tenant acknowledging it. Keep track of every repair that you do with photos and videos if you can. Inspection reports. If there's an inspection done, by your city or some agency, and you go in, your handyman or vendor, someone comes in, have them take photos of the unit at the time of the inspection. And what you're doing is you're making little mile markers of, okay, we're in June right now. So June 2021, the unit looked like this. So if something happens in August and there's some damage, and maybe it's, maybe the tenant doesn't find it, you find it, or your vendor goes, hey, this thing is broken. You can go back and say, well, in June it wasn't broken, and now here we are, let's say in August 2021, and it's broken. So you have documentation. So if you have photos and videos that document in time what the unit looks like, then you can argue, hey, they broke it, not me. Because that happens oftentimes that landlords get blamed for stuff. I need to tell you, if you're a landlord, you know. So that's one way to track it. And then on top of it, keep your receipts. So if you fix something, keep the receipts, whether it's Home Depot or Lowe's or, the hardware store receipts. If you have receipts for the vendor, if it was a handyman, their receipt for what it cost them to patch the wall, et cetera, et cetera. If it's a window, what the window vendor cost to replace the glass, things like that. Then have the receipts for it. And keep that in a file, keep it together. So if later on the tenant challenges it, then you have the documentation to prove this is what it actually costs. This is something I see, and it's something that all landlords struggle with, which is record keeping. But this is so much money, so much R&M is absorbed by landlords for damage that's being caused by tenants. And it's, landlords get very tired and they don't want to do it because oftentimes it's very hard to track because it could be, you know, a landlord-tenant said thing. Well, and it goes, who has the better evidence, who has the better records, and that's on the landlord. So always document everything that goes on whenever there's an inspection. I like inspections. I think that they're great because then you have some report, and if something's not working, you can go and fix it, and then you know from the report, it wasn't working, because tenants don't tell anybody anything, especially not stuff that they've broken. So those are the suggestions I have, and it really, if you have a lease and the lease makes it very clear about these things, that is one thing in your pocket that really helps you enforce your right to collect monies for damages caused by tenants. And another thing is that set precedent to all the other tenants, including that tenant, that you will enforce your rights, and that if someone breaks something, it's going to be their responsibility. So they're more likely than not to be careful with what they're doing in their unit or on the property. So if you have any questions about that or landlording in general, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.